I'm Samantha, though most people just call me Sam. I'm 32, and as long as I can remember, I've been the middle child who blends into the background, caught between my older sister Melanie, the golden child, and Josh, the youngest, who is still trying to figure himself out. It's always been a strange balancing act, as if I've spent my life living in the shadow of someone else's spotlight. Melanie, 3 years older than me, is everything our mother, Cynthia, defines as successful. She's a corporate lawyer who married her college sweetheart, David, a surgeon. Together, they have two incredibly photogenic children and live in a pristine house in the upscale Westfield neighborhood. Melanie's life is exactly what people see in glossy magazines, the life everyone wishes for, while I'm just Sam, holding a steady but uneventful marketing job, living in a small apartment in the city, and single, until about a year ago, when Emily came into my life. Mom has never been subtle about her favoritism. At every family gathering, she finds a way to steer the conversation back to Melanie, whether it's about her latest legal case, the new renovations in her house, or her children's achievements. Melanie's successes are treated like national holidays, while I've learned to just smile and nod through it all. I've been independent since my early 20s, paying my own bills and even graduating from college with honors. But when I walked across that stage, Mom's response was a lukewarm, "That's nice, dear. So, how's Melanie doing?" Josh, at 20, is still finding his way. He's in college, constantly feeling the weight of living up to the impossibly high standards Melanie has set. Mom's advice to him is usually something like, "Maybe you should ask Melanie for advice," or "You could learn a lot from your sister." I can tell it weighs on him, even if he doesn't say it out loud. Last Sunday was another one of those infamous family dinners. These gatherings aren't so much about connecting as they are about basking in Melanie's glow. The dinner took place at Mom's house in Westfield, where the walls practically buzz with her pride for Melanie's success. As we sat down, the atmosphere was already thick with anticipation. Mom couldn't wait to announce Melanie's latest achievement. She was up for a major promotion at her firm. It wasn't even official yet, but you'd think she had won the Nobel Prize by the way Mom was going on about it. So proud of Melanie. "She's always been destined for greatness," Mom said, her face lighting up like a Christmas tree. Her words wove a story where Melanie was the hero of our family. I sat there, trying to focus on my mashed potatoes, while Josh twirled his fork like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. I could tell he felt just as invisible as I did. Then, it happened. Mom turned to me and, almost as an afterthought, asked, "So, Sam, anything new in your life?" Before I could even respond, she added with a knowing smirk, "But nothing as exciting as Melanie's news, I'm sure." Something inside me snapped. For years, I'd swallowed the bitterness and told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But this time, I couldn't let it go. I set my fork down, forced a smile, and said, "Melanie really is the family's favorite project, isn't she?" The room went silent. Even Melanie, who usually seemed unflappable, raised an eyebrow. I could tell she was enjoying the attention as usual. Without missing a beat, Mom replied, "Well, Melanie gives us plenty to brag about." The words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just what she said, but how easily she dismissed me, as if my life didn't even matter. I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything else, and let the conversation drift back to Melanie's promotion. That night, I sat in my apartment, replaying the dinner in my head. The way Mom beamed at Melanie, the way Josh and I barely got a glance, and the way I had let it all slide for far too long. I realized I was done being the overlooked middle child. It wasn't just about Mom anymore. It was about me. I needed to take control of my own story, to stop letting myself be cast as a background character in my sister's tale. That's when I thought of Emily. We'd been dating for about a year, but I hadn't introduced her to my family yet. Not because I was hiding her, but because I wasn't sure how she'd fit into the Melanie-centric world Mom had created. Emily was everything Melanie wasn't. She was warm, creative, and effortlessly charismatic. She ran a nonprofit focused on community development and had this way of lighting up a room without trying. If anyone could shake up the family dynamic, it was Emily. When I told her about the dinner and the family dynamics, she listened carefully, her green eyes locked onto mine. Then she smiled that mischievous smile I had come to love and said, "Sounds like fun. Let's give them something to talk about." I wasn't sure what she meant, but I trusted her. Emily had a way of making things work, of turning even the most awkward situations into opportunities. The next day, I casually mentioned to Mom that I would be bringing someone special to the next family gathering. Her response was lukewarm at best. She asked a few polite questions about Emily's job and background, but it was clear she wasn't expecting much. Melanie, of course, had her own comment when she found out. "Finally bringing a date, huh?" she teased. "It's about time." Her words stung, but I let them roll off me. For the first time, I felt like I had something to hold on to. Emily wasn't just someone I loved. She was a force to be reckoned with. She had already told me she had a few surprises planned for the dinner, but when I asked what they were, she just winked and said, "Trust me." That week, as the dinner approached, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years. For once, I wasn't dreading a family gathering. I was ready to show them who I really was, to step out of Melanie's shadow and into the light. It was time for a change. The day of the dinner arrived, and I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Emily and I arrived at the restaurant on time, and as soon as we walked in, I could feel the atmosphere shift. Heads turned. Emily had that effect on people. She looked stunning in a simple yet elegant navy dress that hugged her in all the right places. Her confidence radiated, and I knew she was about to leave an impression my family wouldn't forget. The family was seated at a long table in a private dining room, a space Mom had rented specifically to celebrate Melanie's promotion. Or, rather, her almost promotion. Melanie sat near Mom at the head of the table, looking like she'd stepped off the cover of a lifestyle magazine. Her husband, David, was beside her, the perfect supportive partner. Josh was slouched at the end of the table, scrolling on his phone, clearly counting down the minutes until he could leave. Mom, of course, was practically glowing with pride, buzzing with excitement at the chance to celebrate her star child. When Emily and I approached the table, the conversation paused. Melanie's eyes widened slightly when she saw Emily, and for a brief moment, her usually composed expression faltered. It was quick, but I saw it, a flicker of surprise. Mom's expression was harder to read. She gave Emily a quick once-over before greeting us with a polite, distant smile. "This is Emily," I said, introducing her as confidently as I could. Emily extended her hand, her warm smile immediately softening the room. "It's so nice to finally meet all of you. Sam's told me so much about her family." Her charm was effortless, and even Josh perked up, putting his phone away to ask her about the book she had tucked under her arm. "It's a collection of essays on urban development," Emily said, handing it to Josh so he could take a look. "I'm always finding inspiration for my nonprofit work." Josh nodded, clearly impressed. "Sounds way more interesting than anything I've been reading recently," but Mom wasted no time in diving straight into the conversation. "So, Emily," she began, her tone polite, yet carrying the familiar skepticism she reserved for anyone outside our immediate family. "What do you do?" Without missing a beat, Emily explained, "I run a nonprofit dedicated to community development in underfunded areas. We've been working on building schools and healthcare facilities in neighborhoods that really need them. It's been an amazing experience so far." David leaned forward, clearly interested. That sounds fascinating. How do you secure funding? Emily then began explaining the grants and partnerships, mentioning a recent campaign that raised several $1 million. The more she spoke, the more engaged David became. Even Mom, despite herself, appeared interested, asking a few follow-up questions about Emily's work. Melanie, however, wasn't impressed. "That sounds nice," she remarked, her voice dripping with passive aggression. "But I imagine it must be tough to get people to take something like that seriously. Charity work can sometimes come off as performative these days." Emily didn't rise to the bait. She smiled and said, "That's why collaboration is so essential. It's never about one person or one organization. It's about building something meaningful together." Josh piped up, joking, "Finally, someone at this table with interesting things to say." His teasing was aimed directly at Melanie, who shot him a glare as though to remind everyone why we were there. Melanie cleared her throat and steered the conversation back to her promotion, and Mom eagerly picked up the thread, going on about Melanie's hard work and how she was always meant for success. I stayed quiet, letting the familiar pattern unfold, but Emily wasn't fazed. She listened politely, her smile unwavering. When the appetizers arrived, Emily surprised everyone by pulling out a beautifully crafted scrapbook. "I thought this might be something you'd enjoy," she said, handing it to Mom. "What's this?" Mom asked, flipping open the cover. "It's a collection of stories and photos from our recent projects," Emily explained. "I thought it might resonate with some of the causes you've supported in the past." Mom's expression softened as she turned the pages, pausing now and then to admire a photo or read a caption. For the first time that evening, she seemed genuinely interested. Melanie, however, wasn't ready to let Emily steal the spotlight. "It's lovely," she said, her tone sharp, "but I imagine it's difficult to measure the true impact of projects like these." Emily didn't take the bait. Instead, she thanked Melanie for the observation and gracefully redirected the conversation back to the importance of long-term community partnerships. Josh jumped in again, joking about how refreshing it was to have someone new at the table who wasn't afraid to challenge Melanie. The real twist of the evening came when someone mentioned the grand piano in the corner of the dining room. Josh, ever the instigator, asked Emily if she could play. At first, she hesitated, but after some encouragement, she agreed. She walked over to the piano, sat down, and began to play. The room fell silent as her fingers moved over the keys, filling the space with a melody that was both haunting and beautiful. By the time she finished, not only was our table clapping, but so were other diners in the restaurant. Melanie looked like she had just bitten into a lemon. "I can't imagine when you find the time for hobbies like that," she remarked, her voice tight. "With my hours at the firm and 2 kids at home, it's hard to even think about playing music." Emily, ever the diplomat, responded with a gracious smile. "It's all about finding balance. I suppose we all have our own challenges." The conversation continued, but something had shifted. By the time dessert arrived, even Mom was asking Emily questions about her travels, work, and hobbies. Meanwhile, Melanie grew quieter. Then came the unexpected reveal. Melanie let slip that her promotion wasn't finalized yet. The table went quiet for a moment before Emily, sensing the tension, smoothly changed the subject, sparing Melanie further embarrassment. After dinner, as we were leaving, Mom turned to me and said, almost to herself, "Emily is quite impressive." I didn't say anything, but inside, I felt a quiet sense of triumph. For once, the focus wasn't entirely on Melanie. It wasn't just about her achievements or her carefully curated life. That night, as Emily and I drove home, I couldn't stop smiling. She had done more than just make an impression. She had shifted the dynamics in ways I hadn't thought possible. And this was only the beginning. A week after the dinner, the air was still buzzing with the subtle shift in the family dynamics. I could tell Melanie wasn't thrilled with how things had unfolded, but she hadn't confronted me directly. Instead, she did what Melanie does best: plan her next move. It started with a phone call from Josh. "You're not going to believe this," he said, the faintest hint of amusement in his voice. "Melanie's organizing a charity gala at her house. Guess who's the guest of honor?" "Herself?" I sighed. "Of course. What's it for?" "Something about giving back to the community," Josh said, translating it as, "It's her way of reclaiming the spotlight." Mom was already going on about how much effort Melanie was putting into it. I wasn't surprised. After all, Melanie thrived on being the center of attention, and Emily had inadvertently stolen that at the dinner. A gala was the perfect way for her to reassert her dominance. When I told Emily about it, she wasn't shocked. Instead, that mischievous glint returned to her eyes. "A gala, huh? Sounds fun." "What kind of idea?" I asked, both curious and slightly wary. Emily leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Let's play along. I'll donate a painting to the auction. Something big, something they won't forget." I blinked. "You paint?" She grinned. "Not often, but when I do, I make it count. Trust me on this one." True to her word, Emily spent the next few days working on the painting in her studio. She didn't let me see it until it was finished, but when she finally unveiled it, I was floored. The piece was stunning, a swirling mix of colors and textures that conveyed both chaos and harmony. It was the kind of art that drew you in and made you feel something. "Emily," I said, struggling to find the right words, "this is incredible." She shrugged, as if it were no big deal. "Let's see what the gala crowd thinks." The day of the gala arrived, and Melanie's house was a vision of extravagance. The living room had been transformed into a mini art gallery, with auction items displayed on pedestals and easels. Emily's painting, listed as an anonymous donation, was one of the highlights. Melanie greeted us at the door, her smile as polished as her outfit. "Sam, Emily, glad you could make it," she said, her tone dripping with fake warmth. "I hope you enjoy yourselves tonight. It's for a great cause, after all." "Looking forward to it," Emily said smoothly, her demeanor as gracious as ever. As the evening went on, Emily mingled effortlessly with the guests, earning compliments and sparking genuine conversations. Meanwhile, Melanie flitted around the room, making sure everyone knew she was the architect of the event. When the auction began, the energy in the room shifted. Item after item went up for bid. But the real buzz started when Emily's painting was announced. The auctioneer described it as a breathtaking piece donated by an anonymous artist, and the crowd leaned in, intrigued. The bidding started modestly, but quickly escalated. Melanie's colleagues and clients were particularly interested, and soon the numbers climbed higher than anyone had anticipated. By the time the gavel fell, the painting had sold for an eye-watering amount. Melanie looked smug, clearly assuming the painting's success reflected well on her event-planning skills. But then, the auctioneer thanked the anonymous donor, and Emily stepped forward, her smile calm and confident. "I painted it," she said simply. The room fell silent for a moment before erupting in applause. People swarmed her, asking about her inspiration and complimenting her talent. I glanced at Melanie, who stood off to the side, her expression frozen in disbelief. She looked like she was about to implode. Dinner that night was tense. Melanie barely touched her food, her frustration simmering just below the surface. Finally, she couldn't hold it in any longer. She set her fork down and accused Emily of orchestrating the entire night to upstage her. "You knew exactly what you were doing," Melanie said, her voice shaking with anger. "This wasn't about the charity. It was about making me look bad." The table went silent. Mom looked between Melanie and Emily, clearly unsure how to intervene. Emily, ever the diplomat, responded with her usual grace. I donated the painting because I believe in supporting causes like this. That's all. I'm sorry if it felt like anything more than that. Josh, unable to resist, chimed in. Come on, Melanie. Not everything's about you. Melanie glared at him, her face flushed. You wouldn't understand, Josh. You've never had to work as hard as I have to get where I am. The tension in the room was suffocating. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice firm but calm. That's enough, Melanie. Tonight wasn't about competition. It was about celebrating talent and generosity. And I think Emily brought something special to this event. We should all be grateful for that. Melanie's jaw tightened, and for a moment, the room fell silent. I thought she was about to explode, but instead, she pushed her chair back, stood up, and said, I'm not feeling well. I think I'll call it a night. David tried to convince her to stay, but she waved him off and headed upstairs. The rest of us lingered a bit longer, attempting to salvage the evening. On the way home, Mom broke the silence in the car. Emily really is remarkable, she said softly. She's something special. I didn't respond, but inside, I felt a quiet sense of pride. For once, the focus wasn't on Melanie. Emily hadn't just made an impression. She'd changed the whole dynamic. And knowing Melanie, this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The aftermath of Melanie's charity gala came quickly. And honestly, it was draining. It started with a flood of phone calls to Mom, where Melanie vented about how Emily and I had hijacked her event. According to her, Emily's reveal of the painting wasn't just inappropriate, it was intentional. Melanie was convinced that Emily was trying to outshine her, and she wanted Mom to take her side. To her credit, Mom didn't jump to Melanie's defense immediately. Instead, she tried to mediate, which, as usual, meant avoiding Melanie's calls when they became overwhelming. Josh, ever the family informant, let me know that Melanie had been going around to our extended family, painting Emily as a social climber who had worked her way into the family just to steal the spotlight. She's losing it, Josh said during one of our late-night phone calls. Even Aunt Bev doesn't buy it, and you know Aunt Bev loves a bit of drama. I sighed. This is classic Melanie. She can't stand not being the center of attention. Well, Josh said, she's definitely not letting this go anytime soon. He was right. A few days later, an invitation arrived in the mail. It was from Melanie. She was hosting a surprise family dinner at her house, and the message was clear. She had exciting news to share, and we couldn't miss it. I showed the invitation to Emily, who read it with a raised eyebrow. Let me guess, she said. This is her way of reclaiming the narrative. Probably, I replied, but I can't exactly skip it without giving her more ammunition. Emily nodded thoughtfully. Let's go. If nothing else, it'll be entertaining. The evening of the dinner, Emily and I arrived at Melanie's house to find it looking even more immaculate than usual. The table was set as if it belonged in a high-end magazine, and Melanie was playing the perfect hostess, greeting everyone with her trademark smile. Sam, Emily, she said, her tone overly bright. So glad you could make it. The dinner started with the usual small talk. Melanie seized every chance to mention her recent successes, from her almost finalized promotion to the gala's success. Mom nodded along, but I could tell her enthusiasm wasn't quite as animated as usual. Halfway through the meal, Melanie stood up and raised her glass to get everyone's attention. I want to thank you all for coming tonight, she said, beaming. David and I have some wonderful news to share. We're expecting our third child. The room erupted with congratulations. Mom immediately started brainstorming baby shower ideas, her face lighting up in that familiar way. Emily leaned over and whispered, "Called it." When Melanie sat back down, She basked in the moment, clearly enjoying the attention. But then, the conversation shifted. David asked Emily about her upcoming plans, and she casually mentioned her performance at an international music festival, a prestigious event she had been invited to after her recital. The timing wasn't intentional. It was just where the conversation naturally went. But the moment Mom heard about the festival, her focus shifted. "That's incredible, Emily," Mom said, her voice full of genuine excitement. "You must be so proud. When is it happening?" Emily smiled. "In a few weeks. I've been preparing for it for a while, but I'm really looking forward to the opportunity." Melanie's smile faltered, and her grip on her glass tightened. I could see her frustration rising. She pushed her plate aside and stood up abruptly. "Excuse me, I need some air," she said, leaving the room with Josh following her. I could hear snippets of their argument from the other room. "You can't handle anyone else getting attention, can you?" Josh said sharply. "You don't understand," Melanie snapped. "She's trying to take everything from me." When they returned, Melanie looked furious, and Josh appeared exasperated. The rest of the meal passed in tense silence, and it was clear any hopes for reconciliation had failed. Later that night, after most of the family had left, I overheard Melanie and Mom in the kitchen. "You're supposed to support me," Melanie hissed. "Not her." Mom's voice was tired but firm. "I'm not choosing sides, Melanie. I just want to celebrate everyone equally. You can't keep acting like this is a competition." Melanie stormed out, slamming the door behind her. In the days that followed, the family became even more divided. Some relatives sided with Melanie, buying into her narrative that Emily was trying to overshadow her. Others, including Mom and Josh, rallied around us, tired of Melanie's constant need to dominate every situation. Then came Melanie's next move. She announced plans to renew her wedding vows in a lavish ceremony, conveniently scheduled for the same weekend as Emily's recital. "She's really pulling out all the stops," Josh said when he told me about it. "I swear she's doing this just to spite you." When Mom found out about the scheduling conflict, she didn't hesitate. "I'll be attending Emily's recital," she said firmly. "Melanie can't expect everyone to drop everything for her anymore." Melanie didn't take the news well. According to Josh, she accused Mom of turning the family against her and threatened to cut ties if she didn't change her mind. But for once, Mom stood her ground. "I've spent too long letting Melanie dictate everything," she told me. "It's time to stop enabling this behavior." As the weekend approached, I felt a strange sense of peace. For so many years, I had been chasing Mom's approval, trying to prove that I was more than just Melanie's shadow. But now, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I had Emily, Josh, and even Mom on my side. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally stepping into my own. Melanie could keep playing her games, but I wasn't interested in competing anymore. This time, I was focused on building something real, something that didn't revolve around her. The weekend of Melanie's vow renewal and Emily's recital finally arrived, and the family's division had never been clearer. A handful of relatives, drawn by the allure of a high-profile event with catered meals and a string quartet, chose Melanie's ceremony. The rest, Mom included, decided to attend Emily's recital. The recital was held in a small, beautifully restored theater in downtown Westbrook. The vintage decor and intimate setting made it feel like stepping into another era. The audience was a mix of family, friends, and locals who came to support the performers. I could feel the warmth in the air as people filtered in, chatting excitedly and taking their seats. Josh sat next to me, practically buzzing with energy. "I can't wait to see Melanie's reaction when she finds out Mom skipped her vow renewal," he murmured with a grin. "She'll be furious." I said, shaking my head, "But honestly, that's not my issue anymore." As the lights dimmed and the recital started, The tension I had been holding began to fade away. One performer after another stepped onto the stage, each displaying amazing skill. When it was finally Emily's turn, I felt a surge of pride. She walked confidently onto the stage, her presence commanding but not overwhelming. The moment she sat at the piano and began to play, the room went silent. Her music wasn't just beautiful, it was transformative. Every note seemed to carry emotion, telling a story that resonated deeply with everyone in the audience. When she finished, the applause was deafening. People stood, cheering and clapping, their admiration overflowing. I glanced at Mom, sitting in the front row. She was clapping harder than anyone else, her face glowing with pride. After the performance, there was a reception in the theater lobby. Family members who had come were raving about Emily's talent, congratulating her and asking about her future plans. Even some distant relatives, who I never thought would warm up to anyone outside Melanie's circle, seemed genuinely impressed. Meanwhile, across town, Melanie's vow renewal wasn't going as smoothly, according to Josh, who got the full story from a relative. Melanie had noticed Mom's absence almost immediately. She tried to play it off, but during her toast, she couldn't resist making a passive-aggressive remark. "Some family members have decided to prioritize other commitments," she said, her tone cold. "But I suppose we can't expect everyone to understand the importance of family." The comment made the room uncomfortable, and several guests exchanged awkward glances. But Melanie didn't stop there. She singled out Mom, saying it was hurtful and disheartening to feel unsupported by her own mother. Mom, who had been getting updates through texts from a relative, responded briefly. She sent Melanie a simple message. "You made your choice. I made mine." By the next morning, word of Melanie's outburst had spread through the family. The perfect image she had carefully crafted began to crack. Some relatives who had supported her started questioning her behavior, and a few even reached out to Mom to express their support. When Melanie confronted me about the weekend, she was furious. She accused Emily of deliberately trying to overshadow her, claiming the timing of the recital was no accident. "This is exactly what she wanted," Melanie spat, "to turn everyone against me." Emily, calm as always, didn't take the bait. Instead, she suggested that Melanie sit down with us to talk things through and try to repair the family dynamics. "Why would I need her help?" Melanie snapped. "I don't need to fix anything. You're the problem, not me." It was clear she wasn't ready to have an honest conversation, and I wasn't going to force it. Later that evening, Mom pulled me aside. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she said, her voice quieter than usual. I can see now how much pressure I put on Melanie over the years. I wanted her to be perfect, and in doing so, I think I created this competition between the two of you. It wasn't fair. Say, Sam, I see that now. Her words caught me off guard. For years, I had waited for Mom to acknowledge the favoritism, the way she always seemed to prioritize Melanie's achievements over mine. Hearing her admit it was both validating and bittersweet. "It means a lot that you're saying this," I said finally. "I just wish it hadn't taken so long." "I know," Mom said, her eyes misty. "But I want to do better for you, for Josh, for all of us." In the weeks that followed, the family began to adjust to a new normal. Our gatherings became smaller, more intimate, and surprisingly peaceful. Emily's presence became a key part of these moments, her warmth and charm helping to bridge gaps and heal old wounds. Melanie, on the other hand, withdrew. She stopped attending family events and kept her distance, refusing to acknowledge her role in the growing divide. Some relatives stayed loyal to her, but many grew tired of her constant need to control the narrative. While Emily and I were preparing dinner, Josh stopped by with some news. "Melanie's telling people she's cutting ties with you," he said, his tone a mix of annoyance and amusement. I shrugged. If that's what she needs to do, then so be it. I'm done chasing her approval. Josh nodded. Good, because honestly, Sam, you're better off without her drama. He was right. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free to focus on the people who truly mattered. Free to live my life without worrying about whether it measured up to Melanie's. Emily's recital became an annual tradition, something the family eagerly looked forward to each year. Mom, who had once been so focused on perfection, began celebrating each of us for who we were, not just for what we achieved. Even Josh, who had always tried to avoid family drama, found his voice and became an integral part of our new traditions. Looking back, it was clear that Melanie's departure had been a turning point. It hadn't been easy, but it forced all of us to confront the toxic dynamics we had been living with for so long. I no longer felt like the invisible middle child, the shadow in Melanie's spotlight. I had my own light now, one that burned brighter than I had ever imagined. And with Emily by my side, I knew this was only the beginning.